choose to love with freedom flies from my heart where the light keeps shining. And I choose to feel the whole world crying for the strength that we can rise above. I choose love.
Welcome. We are Grace Healing Ministries. This is Ina Marie Hale.
This is Larry Reynolds.
And we are overjoyed to be with you. And this session is going to be pretty exciting. We're into the 5th session. And I really feel it's important that we engage first in prayer again, as we have always committed to you to do so. But I also pray to specifically release some things before we engage in this instruction. It is very simple. The people may bring more to it in their minds than needs to be. So we're going to pray for holy protection, divine grace, and God's glory to be revealed within this time. So we breathe deep. Alviamo tonieve carum, moireamo shero mo so seriandre hamum divu. Breathing deep. Yeshua al miele camonduro koyo, niro aimo shori nikali ondro koyus. Breathing deep. Abun la baja mondro kolimie abajoshnon yehi. Yahweh, we thank you, praise you, and worship you. We surrender now into this time, that your Spirit would guide us to bring deeper clarity and wisdom to all things revealed, to make your glory and presence known within every encounter we come upon. We trust you, praise you, and worship you through your most blessed and holy name, Yahweh Lachim Etuim and Yeshua Avun Solakanduriana. Amen.
Amen.
So we are praying that you are blessed in your day, but we also want to suggest that we are like the 5th stage in this video series. So if you're coming in at this point and you haven't listened to 1 through 4, I'd recommend that you back up a little bit to understand exactly what's going on within this particular series, which is Grace Healing Origins, part 1 through whichever one it takes to complete it. As we've stated in previous videos, we don't script. Life is not scripted. We don't form scripts. We just surrender into prayer and let God bring forth what is to extend and what is to be brought forth for your edification. And most importantly, the process of revealing God's love and returning us to recognize His glory in every situation we encounter.
Yes.
So, is there anything on your heart at this point?
Other than that, I am very excited to be part of this, of the revelation of truth of God's Word, to be surfaced and being used in such a way for those to receive that which is within them, to actually awaken to the truth of His love being manifested in them, and to walk in the freedom that He has for them in their lives, where they are now and what He has ahead.
Yes.
He cares deeply about you and loves you more than you know. So that's one reason we are here and moving forward in this series of the videos. So I'm excited.
Yes, so am I. And I also want to speak to the freedom of any fear, because I know we stated at the close of this previous video that we'd be getting into some grounds where God has called me to serve people fully embellished in the demonic. And I know that many people that will come to these videos, it probably doesn't mean anything to them. You might have seen the movie Exorcism, or you might have seen whatever, and it's like, it doesn't bother me. But I also know that within much of the religious instruction out there, there are people that immediately go, and they interfere of the possibility of what they're about to encounter in this discussion of the demonic. And I can assure you that we are going to pray right now to release any spirits of fear that maybe govern the nature of individuals receiving this message in this time, because there is no fear that can hold you. For you are the very manifestation of God's design, God's presence, her wisdom, his strength, his clarity, his authority through love. Yes. There is nothing of a demonic nature or nothing of a spiritual nature that can harm you but that which you give your power over to. And this kind of goes right in line with what was experiencing in this situation, as I was called by a church. And yes, I'm a lay minister kind of guy, the way they define it in the church. And I was called by the church, meaning the priests, to go doing the exorcism. Why? Because most times priests and ministers aren't taught how to deal with the demonic. They're taught that it's there, and they're taught about the words that describe it, and then they're taught how to be an administrator. They're taught how to manage people. They're taught how to experience the process of teaching, how to work with the crowd dynamic, how to work with individuals to guide them into the instructions of the church. What we understand is many of the covenants that I've been told by ministers is they form first an allegiance unto the faith that they practice, so that all people might find the presence of God within. We see it slightly different within Grace Healing. We submit ourselves first before the presence of God, form our allegiance first unto God, as we are blessed to serve alongside of any one person in any one particular faith.
Yes.
We don't make an allegiance to a certain religion. We don't make an allegiance to a certain defined belief. We make one allegiance, back to that image that fell off the planet. Seek me first. We make one allegiance to Yahweh's presence. And if the nature of that which we're encountering does not line with the nature of God's holy attributes, her perfect wisdom, his divine order, his perfect sanctity, then we set it aside. So what's happened to me in situations where I've had the church call me and ask me to go do an exorcism over somebody, I don't see that as some fearful exploit or something that I have to pray up to be ready for.
Yeah, that's what I'm familiar with. Let's prepare for this battle.
Yeah, exactly.
This is what it has always been, is a battle. Rebuke and bind and cast out.
Right. And within Grace Healing, we don't walk that ground.
Yeah, that's
because our
totally
mindset
opposite.
is very simple. It's been governed by God's presence. And I'll speak it as it comes forth prophetically, that I, the Spirit of God within you, that you surrender unto the fullness of my presence within, and nothing of corruption can come against you. That it is my presence through surrender that my glory will be revealed, the nature of my Spirit be known, and the awesome wonder of my power revealed before you in each and every act you encounter. So to me, it's not about how am I going to pray myself up. It's more about how am I going to surrender to be less, that God is more. So these priests came by and they picked me up and they brought me over to this individual's house. And as we came in, this individual was already in the throes of what you would describe as a Linda Blair type spectacle, quite frankly, is what it looked like. And he was writhing and screaming out and crying out and all kinds of hostile words coming out of his mouth. But then the bizarre thing was, in a moment, the voice would change in resonance from a high-pitched male rasp to this aggressive, hostile, deep tone to this feminine screaming, crying and shouting out words and swears and yelling. And it was going through this litany of voices, like legions of voices, meaning many, for those who aren't familiar with that language. The many voices that were coming up were intense, quite frankly, vile. And I just felt this overwhelming presence of God's love within me step forward to embrace this guy. And the priests were right beside me, walking with me the whole way. And as I came to the individual, I reached out and placed my hand on his shoulder, and he looked at me and freaked, went silent, fell to the ground, and as he's falling to the ground, I'm going down to the ground to catch him. And as I got I ended up like in a kneeling position, and he kind of fell onto me with his head like against my belly. And all I felt was love and compassion. I felt God's presence. I was diminished, that God's presence was increased.
Yeah.
And I just felt this loving presence of God. Not a desire to take up armor, not a desire to pick up a sword and slice and smite the enemy, but this loving presence of God. And all of a sudden he starts manifesting, and I start to notice, wait a minute, he's not even on the floor. He's screaming again, and all of a sudden this bile starts, this really like deep, the only way to describe it is, and please forgive me for this, is like the Linda Blair incident, and it's like pea soup. It was like this green bile that was just coming out of his body, and I was trying to hold a waste can bucket that had been sitting there. I kind of pulled the waste can bucket in front. He's just coughing this stuff forward, and when he's done coughing that stuff forward, he's speaking all these swears and yelling and screaming, and again the voices are coming and going, different voices. And I just felt love, and the moment I felt the love wave into me as this display was coming out in front of me, because it took a moment to kind of wind back up again, because me and my ignorance, I was still fueling it, because I was like, well, what? I was curious instead of submissive to God. I was like wondering, what is this? So it did manifest more. So as this was rising, I just felt this wave of peace and love flow through me. And he quieted. And I'm cradling this man's head in my hands, and I'm just and the more of what God still instilled in me over the weeks previous to this was God's love makes all things new.
Yes.
Not my ability to be a warrior. We hear this mentioned many times throughout the Christian body now, to be a prayer warrior. I believe that can't be done. You have to be a minister in love.
Yes.
For if I'm to embrace this prayer warrior, I have to embrace the spirit of war.
Yeah.
If I'm even to embrace the concept or vibrational awareness of warrior, it must begin with the spirit of war. Warrior.
I just want to interject just real quickly. It reminds me and was rising about Yeshua when he was upon the earth. He not once.
Right.
He was in love. It was all in love. And that's what he says, we're to do greater things than he will upon this earth. And to be an imitator of him, that he that lives within us. And never once, and in the scriptures, if you go to any of the scriptures, not once did he ever do the rebuke and bind and cast out. He would just
speak it,
and it was gone.
Yes.
It's interesting.
It is. So in that respect, how can I touch the presence of God? By submitting to myself to something of a spiritual nature. God would never cast me into sin, meaning spiritual influence, to find his presence. Yeah. God would present his presence and allow me to engage in these experiences to return to his presence. It's a difference. We flipped it all upside down in the way humanity looks at it. So
each instance where you've got these demonic spirits, and I'm going to let you finish because I don't want to get off track here, is again engaging first in prayer, seeking him first.
Exactly.
Because each one is individually different. They're not going to be the same to a measure that you have to address.
Right, exactly.
But it is in love.
And again, God through discernment, once you engage in God, you may see, like in this case with this individual, the many voices rising, feminine, masculine, all these voices and swears and things coming through this individual, which were generational demonic influences. To be completely direct for you, this is what I'm speaking to earlier of the three heavens, highest of all heavens, perfect and pure, spiritual realm, the order of principalities, the spiritual influences, and then the body of our all things seen within our sight on the earth.
And interesting, the priests are sitting off because they don't know what to do.
Well, no, that's the funny part. They weren't just sitting off. What happened was it was so intense that I thought they would beside me.
Yeah.
In prayer and in support. And so as I'm one point, and I just felt the peace overcome him, and then his body actually settled to the floor.
Yeah.
And then I put the trash can down, and I'm just praying and loving him as God would love him. I look down and there's no feet beside me. And I'm wondering, because again, I'm on my knees. And
you're not paying
a moment or
attention
so
to
ago,
where they are anyway.
I thought I saw their feet there, but then I'm looking and I'm like, they're gone. And I'm still holding the man's head, and I look back and they're hidden behind the couch.
Oh my God.
They're standing behind the couch like this, with their hands on top of the couch, looking over, going, what's happening? What's going on? Now, I'm not doing this as a sense of mockery.
No.
But I need to honestly get you as the audience to look at this for a second. Here's individuals that were supposed to be instructed as spiritual teachers, guides, and mentors over people that are seeking the measure of the earth, yet they don't even understand the measure of the earth. And here they are. Now, come on. If we're dealing with the demonic, is a couch going to protect you? What was the reasoning? There was no reasoning.
No.
It was not them that were doing this. It was not these priests that chose to hide behind the couch. It was the spirit of fear governing the nature of their actions, and they didn't even function with logic. The logic they had did not fit the earth. It did not fit the presence of God. Therefore, it was spiritual influence upon their actions. They were governed through the spirit of fear, and I felt within me an incredible outpouring of love toward them as well, as I was in prayer over this individual. And all of a sudden, this individual looks up at me, oh, where'd you come from? And he's looking at me, and I'm just smiling. And I said his name, and I knew his name, and I just loved him. I said, it's okay, buddy, and we just sat there, and I just held him. I held his head cradled in my lower abdomen, with his body kind of laying against the legs. No real recollection of time. It just kind of unfolded. Yeah. And I look over, and they see that it's calmed down. There's no more manifestation. There's no more bile. And then one of them came kind of around from the couch and was standing by the arm of the couch. The other one was still behind the couch. And then eventually, as I'm talking with this individual, just sharing like with the guys, he and I were just talking. It was no longer the demonic. One of the things that the priest shared with me later is they did not understand why it just ended.
They thought there had to be a long process.
Exactly. It had to be this process of cleansing and purification. Then we had to bless the space and this and that. I'm like, no. If God's love is the one thing we engage with, God's love is the one thing that sustains.
And it's gone.
Exactly.
It doesn't have to be this long, drug-out type of thing. Exactly. And that's what ministries do, and that's why it's in that function, why it takes so long.
Exactly, because they form that construct in it, therefore they form it spiritually that must unfold in that way, and they create more of a drama and a spectacle.
Yeah, it's so
and in
simple.
that, I'm going to segue into this other experience that I ran into when I was running a healing conference with a healing conference that runs up in the Northeast here. They had asked me to come and do what they called the deliverance ministry. And honestly, at that time in my spiritual awakening and my experiences through church and all the different stuff like that, when they said the word deliverance to me over the telephone and invited me to come to this event, which I had been to like I think 2 times before that, but then they wanted me to lead the deliverance ministry, the thing that went through my mind in my ignorance was, what are they talking about, deliverance? And I thought of Burt Reynolds and Ned Beatty, the movie, when they were going down the river.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, what do they mean deliverance ministry? But I did not search the situation, or I would have presented my ignorance and could have potentially destroyed something that God wanted to form, not something that Larry already knew.
Yeah.
So I just surrendered in prayer as I'm listening to this wonderful older woman. She was in her late 80s and saying, we have to have you here, and you are the one. The previous leader of the deliverance ministry says you're supposed to be the one that's supposed to lead this minute. I'm like, well, if that's what God wants, I'll be there. So they set it up so that I would have a room, and we would go there and I would do the deliverance ministry. But quite frankly, when I was heading there, I knew nothing about what they were talking about. Because I was used to doing this thing of love, and I wouldn't have to fight the demonic because the demonic held no power, because once God's love was known, there was no demonic manifestation. And they were telling me all these stories about how there would be manifestations of the demonic, and they would be this, and you have to get control of it, and you have to bind it and cast it. And I'm like going,
whoa,
wow, what is this? And so, honestly, I didn't have the earthly knowledge to deal with this.
Yeah, you only had the spiritual.
But I knew that I had God with me, so I'm like, okay, let's go on this journey. Let's see what happens. What's God going to do? What is God going to do if Larry just submits himself to this total place of unknowing and says, okay, God, do something? And God did. So I get to this event, and there were over 1,000 people there, somewhere between 1,200 and 1,500 people there, and it was conference facility opened up to a wide expanse. And then I was taken off to one room, and they set up what was called deliverance chapels. And it was a separate room that was filled with, what they did was they set up the chairs in a horseshoe shape and put a chair in the middle. And then they had another setup in a horseshoe shape and a chair in the middle. And then another setup in a horseshoe shape and a chair in the middle. So there were 3 separate sitting areas for the subject, meaning the demonically influenced individual that was supposed to be set in the middle chair. And then the people of that particular team, which I was given 3 different teams of 7 people. Okay?
Oh boy.
That I was supposed to lead in this deliverance process. And this is going to get kind of comical in a way as things unfold, because again, I'm like this spectator in the God sport watching this whole thing unfold going, wow, some of the stuff that they're saying is really kind of like out there. It was just, wow, that's not the way I see it. I mean, I see this beautiful, loving presence. But there was this wonderful, amazing, beautiful, older gentleman. And I can say his first name. His name was Tom. Sweet, gentle, loving guy. And he was from Canada, and he used to lead the deliverance ministry. I didn't realize that the spiritual leading had come through him, that they were supposed to have me lead the deliverance team. So I was required to pray over the deliverance teams, the 3 different teams of 7, and set up this day. And honestly, don't even remember what God spoke through, because I got my tongue over to God, and just the prayer came forward. They were blessed in a way that they hadn't quite experienced before, and were kind of like walking around like, whoa, what just happened? And off we went into the crowd. So there's like the 1,000+ people sitting there, and I walk in again. I don't know what the structure is. I wasn't following a structure. I walk in, and all of a sudden I'm just led, and I go in this direction, and I see this person, and I just saw this behavior rising in them, and I just saw God's love, and they fell in between the chairs.
Wow. And
they were just laying there. So I'm just looking at them, and I just walk over and I bless them. I kind of rested my hand on their head as they were laying there, and I just prayed, and then I walked away. So this beautiful gentleman, Tom, is watching me because he was my partner. I didn't realize that he was the original leader to the thing, but he was partnering with me because he knew that there was supposed to be a new thing and he was to learn from it. I didn't know all this at that time. It was unfolding in the background, and I was eventually told that this is what transpired while you were here. Tom was feeling led to put you in this place of leadership because God was birthing something new, and he had to learn from it. So, again, all the deliverance teams, they're kind of like strategically placed throughout the room. Because remember now, this is 3 conference rooms opened up into 1 conference room, so there's 1 team here. 1 team in the central room, another team in the central room, but it's all one big room. But they had them strategically placed because we were going to take on the war of the demonic.
Wow.
And I'm walking around the happy idiot thinking Burt Reynolds and Ned Beatty going down the river.
Yeah.
And I'm no clue about this warrior mindset because I'm not willing to embrace the spirit of war. I'm only embracing God's love.
Easy, simple.
So I'm moving along, and then I'm moved over, and I see this other person, and I just feel the presence of God flow through me, and they fall. And they end up sitting there, and they're like aisles away from me. It wasn't a matter of what I could do to get to them physically and hold them and bind them, which was what everybody wanted to do on the team.
Yeah.
And they just fall at the distance. And the key was no spectacle would rise to take people's focus off the beauty and the glory that was coming from the stage, which was this other spiritual teacher doing incredible teaching of love, peace, and awareness. And then somebody singing a amazing, beautiful worship song, and another woman who's known throughout the world for playing the violin, spiritual violin, and she does these songs where the violin sounds like it's just singing God's grace.
Wonderful.
So these little demonic spectacles that were rising would take the attention from this glory that was unfolding, but I didn't feel the need to fight. I just felt this, and then God's love would quell it. It would just end the demonic display.
Yeah. Oh.
And again, they weren't accustomed to this because for the 15 years that they held these conferences, they always had these massive eruptions of demonic influence in the setting. And they would take everything of their teams to get these demonic experiences out of the room to the deliverance chapel where they could deal with it.
Oh my
okay?
gosh, yeah.
So, and I'm giving to you as kind of in an animated way because that's the way I was seeing it unfold. And I'll go further on that in a second because all of a sudden God's Spirit just grabbed hold of me so strong that I was just ahead across the room, and I was over in this, like, number 1 of the 3 rooms, and I was in the central aisle between 1 and 2. And I just got this, I got to move now. And Tom starts after me, and I just went right across this room, and I saw this guy, and what I saw in him was not him. I saw many things of a spiritual nature rising. And as I get around the corner into the aisle separating 2 and 3, rooms 2 and 3, I see him, and this shriek comes out of him, and I look, and as I look, he looks back at me in defiance, and then voices start coming forward. And I just walked over, and I just yelled, and the moment I touched him, bam, he went to the floor. Done. No noise, no spectacle, but everybody's like wondering what just happened, because they heard this shriek, they heard this noise, they started hearing the swears come out, but then it ended. And I walk over, so I took this individual, just like the individual I described in the exorcism that I did in that person's home, and I just kind of held him. And I was holding his head in my arm, and as I am, I'm just praying into God's love, and he looks up at me, and it was hysterical, because he looks up at me and goes, exactly the same thing the other guy said at that house. Where'd you come from? And he was talking normal. There was no display, no demonic, no hostility, no aggression, no voices. It was just peace. So I'm thinking, cool, I'm done. I stand up to go leave, and this is where I say the comedy part kind of comes in. And I look to my right as I'm stepping back to Tom, and Tom's just smiling. He's loving it. Because he's seeing this new thing. There's no battle. There's no spectacle. Because the word I kept receiving through the whole thing was this to quell the spectacle. Because they were so used to seeing the spectacle that they started to use the spectacle as a way to reveal God's glory.
Yeah.
Instead of God's love to reveal God's glory. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely.
So I come out of the end of the aisle, and Tom is standing there, and I believe we gave each other a brief hug. And I look to my right, and here comes the Keystone Cops.
Oh, no.
It's the only way to describe it. It was the funniest thing. But I'm sitting there in a state of humor. They're so serious. They're running, I swear to you, they're running around the corner of the end of the aisle, separating room 2 and 3.
Oh, my gosh.
Where the people would come walking down to get to their seats. And they're like running around that corner, and you see them, 7 of them, and I see the other 7 poised and waiting to be a reinforcement. And I'm like thinking, oh my God. Well, they come running over, and they drop into the aisle, force all the chairs out of their way like they're getting to this guy, and the guy is still kind of laying there in a state of bliss. And we bind and cast, and they start yelling out these words. We bind and cast the demons of blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, boom, guess what?
They come.
I'm seeing as they're speaking. We bind and cast the demon of blah, blah, blah. We bind and cast the demon of aggression. We bind and cast the demon of influence. We bind and cast the spirit of profanity. They were saying demon of profanity. I was seeing within the ether them call spirits forth and cast them into him.
They
casting them into him. And then what were they doing? Binding these spirits within this form. And you could see his body rise up and begin to heave, thrust, scream, shout, yell, everything they just said. Spirit of profanity, aggression, hostility, all manner of things. So what we're going to do is we're going to end this video right now for the sake of time on the YouTube. We ask that you please subscribe and like these videos so that this message gets out. We're going to end this real quickly. We're going to start right up in the next video and continue this on because you need to understand what unfolded in the next few moments. What transpired for this individual, and I will say his first name because I was permitted to at that time. He said I could use his name. His first name was John. And I was moved to step into that setting of these deliverance ministers binding and casting things, and reach forward and just place my hand upon him, and Yahweh Ulevo Shuntukul Yemendracham Abun. And in that moment, all of it ended. But the depth of where this story is going is so powerful in the way that you see how we as humanity continue to hold the spirits bound here. We need to change this. And this next part, I believe part 6, will help you to understand what's been transpiring for 2,000 years and a possibility that we extend to you of what an alternative might be.
Yes.
We love you dearly. We're going to close real quickly, and we're going to just speak Yahweh's name for the sake of moving into this next video, and then we will close and join you in prayer in just a moment. Yahweh, Yeshua, Abun, Solkabun, Teribriesh Nacham, Dries Mayutero. Amen. We love you dearly. We'll be back with you in just a moment.
Yeah.